Forza Horizon 3 was recently enhanced on the Xbox One X, delivering on the promise of true 4K with uncompromising results beyond a 4K resolution. But it was immediately dismissed for only running at 30 FPS. Let's take a look at why the Xbox One is fenced into a 30 FPS limitation on bigger games. The Xbox One launched at the end of 2013 with an AMD 8-core 1.75 GHz processor combined with a 1.3 teraflop 853 MHz GPU. Frame rates are handled by the processor, the CPU, and the goal of this hardware was to offer 1080p rendered games at a minimum target of 30 FPS. The PS4 and the Xbox One both use the Jaguar 8-core APU microarchitecture, and both consoles followed the same CPU approach. The Xbox One was ready for market at the end of 2013, and that CPU was built in that same year, essentially new tech from AMD. But in 2013, desktop PC gaming was dominated by Intel's i3 and i5 CPUs ranging from $100 to $200. And AMD's FX chips at $100 to $150, but the Xbox One uses an equivalent AMD FX 4100, a retail CPU that launched that year for $115. These desktop CPUs were adequately capable of 60 FPS at 1080p gaming, but in cost meant a 1080p 60 PC in 2013 was well over the $400 price of a console. So when the Xbox Project Scorpio was about to be unveiled, tech enthusiasts prayed for a mid-generation refresh to be supported by AMD's brand new Ryzen CPU cores. Ryzen was due to market in 2017, the same year that the Xbox One X was due to release. But Microsoft started production for the Scorpio after a completed design sometime in 2016. And the window for Ryzen was far too narrow. Cost was also a driving factor, since Microsoft knew that in order to deliver on a true, upgraded console, they needed to push a future-proof standard of 4K screen resolutions ahead of the market, moving quickly to UHD TVs in 2017. Most will argue that Microsoft invested too much hardware budget into the GPU side of the custom APU on the X, and they'd be half right. The Ryzen retail market CPUs at launch ranged from $100 to $300, and the sum of all the X parts was quickly adding up. $500 has always been a slippery slope for console consumers. After all, console gamers were used to, maybe even conditioned, to play games at 30 and 60 FPS with no option to make concessions. Basically, the Xbox One X was built to crank the visuals to the max, even if it meant letting the frame rate dictate the rest. Ryzen was out of the question, and a Ryzen Vega-based APU to push even 1440p 60 on console was out of the budget for a completed box. So Microsoft overclocked the Jaguar chip, but pushed it a little farther than the Pro from 1.75 to 2.3 GHz, with custom cores designed to reduce workload. Was it enough to push the game library over 30 FPS? No. And yes. Surprisingly, some comparable titles benefit from the risk of keeping the same CPU. Uncharted 4 is a flagship, first-party exclusive on the PS4 Pro at 30 FPS. It is very comparable to Gears of War, another visually stunning first-party, third-person action shooter. Both games are very beautiful in their own right, offering impressive vistas and set pieces. But the X offers ultra and high PC settings as the icing on the cake. But it gets better. While both games offer a competitive multiplayer mode at 60 FPS, it is the X alone that can offer 60 FPS in the campaign mode for Gears of War 4. Impressive? Expectations have been evened early on with the Xbox One X, with most open worlds not offering a way into the 60 FPS experience, until The Witcher 3 was placed side by side with the Pro and the X. The Pro presents Witcher 3 at a checkerboarded half of the native pixel count and constrained to 30 FPS, while the X delivers a near native 4K frame buffer at 30 FPS, with the option to play at a 60 FPS target. Now, it'll drop in open world places and the main hub city full of NPCs wreck the frame rate, but the X really does provide a PC-like experience on a $500 console. A cursory look at 170 games on the Xbox Enhanced list, and there are over 45 60 FPS titles. For Forza Horizon 3, Playground Games said that 30 FPS was a choice the developer made. Now, this is a great example of developers choosing what resolution and frame rate works for their vision. Hardware doesn't always dictate what frame rate or resolution a game will run, but this is a good indication that Forza Horizon 4 could be developed with a 60 FPS HD option and a native 4K 30 option. But I played 90% of this game at 1080p 60 on PC. And as a PC and console gamer, I would appreciate the option to lower visuals to play at 60 FPS. And parity is not an issue, because Play Anywhere has allowed PC gamers at 60 FPS to compete against Xbox One gamers in Forza Horizon 3 for over a year. But there's something magical about the presentation of Forza Horizon 3 at 30 FPS on the X that cannot be dismissed. The implementation of PC quality motion blur, smoothing out transitions at 33 milliseconds, provides a visual presentation, although somewhat dulled without the shiny, slick, smooth 60 Hz, and shadow resolution was even pushed beyond what can be attained on the PC. The game still looks undeniably beautiful 100% of the time, with that very consistent frame rate at a mix of high and ultra settings on the Xbox One X. Playground Games is using the Xbox One X as their lead platform, which pushes the potential for better games by not allowing the base hardware to hold back games, but instead using the approach to, and for lack of a better word, dumb down the base Xbox One version to keep console gaming moving forward. But we can place responsibility on the developers as much as the hardware. Looking at the specs of the Xbox One X, power favors visuals over frame rate. But keeping costs down by overclocking 2013 CPU tech, Xbox can keep full compatibility across the Xbox One family of games. The APU is top-heavy with graphics prowess that pushes enhanced titles from half of 4K to full native 4K, and the compromise that draws criticism stems from the choice to support 4K in the Blu-ray drive and graphics over a higher frame rate, which would have certainly tipped the price scale over the $500 limit. With over a quarter of the game's library on the Xbox One X playable at 60 FPS, more developers need to see the call for more graphics options that prioritize frame rate. Frame rate is king in almost any game, and in some it is absolutely essential. And a lot of these games support it on console. But those of us that bought a 4K TV didn't make the upgrade to play games at a quarter of the screen resolution. If the PS4 Pro is pushing many titles at half of the resolution, it would be beneficial to lower settings across the board to allow a 1440p 60 mode, if the CPU can handle it. Barring everything we've said about frame rate and resolution, we've been truly enjoying the breadth and scope and visual splendor in our favorite games. After a few minutes of graphics scrutiny has passed, and we are immersed in the industry's best, all that really matters is the games. This is Colteastwood. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope the in-betweens you're having as much fun as I am. I blasted through 4 huge games since the X was released, and I'm looking forward to news coming out already for 2018, and I'll be reporting on what's coming up this spring. If you're new here, subscribe to the channel. My channel's been around for a while, but I just started getting into this groove. And if you like what you're seeing, share it with a friend or on social media. It helps a lot. I hear a lot of criticism, and I dish out a fair amount regarding one of our favorite hobbies. And everything doesn't have to be an extreme. I love Xbox. It's where I do almost all of my gaming. That doesn't mean that I have to hate on other people or platforms. We all have a preference, and we can be passionate about gaming without being overbearing. Be good to those on other platforms, seek out positivity, and truly enjoy your games. And remember, Be nice.